Right now, if you got seriously hurt, you'd call for help. If you got lost, you'd check a map on your phone. If you got hungry, you'd walk to a store, already stocked with food someone else grew, processed, and shipped for you. None of that existed for most of human history. And yet your ancestors didn't just survive. They thrived for hundreds of thousands of years without a single piece of what you'd call technology today. So how did they actually do it? The honest answer isn't one clever invention. It's not fire or tools or shelter alone. It's something stranger and more fundamental, a set of overlapping survival systems that worked together so well, entire generations passed through them without a single written instruction manual. Let's start with the most obvious gap: no maps, no compasses, no GPS, just an open, unmarked world. And yet, early humans traveled enormous distances with striking accuracy. Anthropologist Kim Hill, who has spent decades studying the H people of Paraguay, documented how skilled hunter-gatherers build extraordinarily detailed mental maps of their environment, tracking landmarks, water sources, seasonal food patches, and safe routes across territory that would look like featureless wilderness to an untrained eye. This wasn't magic. It was pattern recognition built through repetition, starting in early childhood, refined over an entire lifetime. Think about that for a second. No lines on paper, no stored coordinates, just a living, mental model of the land, updated constantly and passed down by walking the same routes with someone older who already knew them. Navigation solved. One problem. But what about danger itself? Early humans faced predators, rival groups, and environmental hazards without weapons, remotely comparable to anything modern. So how did a physically unremarkable primate, slower than most predators and weaker than many, survive at all? The answer lies partly in something you might not expect: cooperation, and specifically, the ability to plan together. Anthropologist Sarah Hrdy has argued that human survival depended heavily on what she calls cooperative breeding, a system where child rearing wasn't handled by parents alone, but distributed across a wider group of relatives and allies. This wasn't just convenient, it was often essential. Why would that matter for basic survival? Because a group that shares childcare frees up more adults to hunt, gather, watch for danger, and respond quickly to threats. A lone parent, isolated and overwhelmed, is vulnerable in ways a cooperative group simply isn't. Survival wasn't an individual skill. It was a distributed one, spread carefully across an entire social network. Fire deserves its own place in this story, and not just as a tool for cooking. Archaeologist Michael Chazan, who studied evidence of fire control at Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, dating back roughly 1 million years, has pointed out that fire fundamentally reshaped what predators could and couldn't do to early humans. A controlled flame kept large carnivores at a distance during the most vulnerable hours of the day. Nightfall, when human eyesight is at its weakest and many predators are at their strongest. Fire didn't just cook dinner. It bought your ancestors the ability to sleep safely, something almost every other primate on the savannah couldn't count on. And once fire was reliable, it opened another door entirely: time. Without fire eating up daylight hours through constant foraging and raw digestion, early humans gained free time after dark, time that had to be spent somewhere. Some researchers argue this is when oral storytelling, teaching, and complex language likely flourished, since firelight created a natural gathering point where attention could focus on one speaker, instead of scattering across a dangerous, dark landscape. Consider what that actually means. The fire wasn't just protection. It was potentially the birthplace of your species' first classrooms. Shelter and clothing solved a different kind of problem entirely, one tied directly to climate rather than predators. Without woven fabric, synthetic insulation, or heated buildings, early humans still managed to survive brutally cold winters. In places like Ice Age Europe, archaeological evidence shows they achieved this through carefully processed animal hides, sewn together using bone needles and sinew thread, tight enough to trap body heat effectively. This wasn't a crude afterthought. It was precision work, refined over generations, since a poorly made garment in a genuinely cold environment could mean the difference between survival and death within a single bad night. Shelters followed the same logic. Some groups built semi-permanent structures using mammoth bones as a supporting frame, layered over with hides to block wind and retain warmth, an approach that required serious planning, cooperation, and accumulated engineering knowledge passed down specifically for surviving a landscape most modern people would consider uninhabitable without heated buildings and thick winter coats. Tool making deserves its own moment here too, since it's easy to underestimate just how much skill it actually demanded. Knapping a single effective stone tool required understanding fracture patterns in different stone types, controlling the angle and force of every strike with real precision, and recognizing, often instantly, when a piece of raw material simply wasn't suitable to work with at all. This wasn't guesswork passed down through vague suggestion. It was closely supervised, hands-on instruction, refined across a lifetime, since a poorly made spear point or cutting edge could fail at exactly the wrong moment, with consequences ranging from a lost meal to a lost life. Medicine is another area people rarely think about. When picturing ancient survival, and it's more sophisticated than most assume. Long before pharmacies, humans developed detailed knowledge of which plants healed, which caused harm, and which did both, depending on preparation and dosage. This knowledge wasn't guesswork passed down by luck. It was built through careful, repeated observation, refined across countless generations, and tested in the only laboratory available. Real consequences. A wrong plant, eaten at the wrong time, could kill. A correctly prepared one could stop bleeding, calm a fever, or heal a wound faster than doing nothing at all. Groups that got this knowledge wrong didn't survive long enough to pass anything down. Groups that got it right built pharmacological traditions that some indigenous communities still maintain today, refined over thousands of years without a single lab coat or microscope. Now think about injury itself. Something modern life has almost entirely outsourced to hospitals. A broken bone in the ancient world wasn't necessarily a death sentence. Skeletal evidence from multiple archaeological sites shows individuals who survived severe fractures, sometimes for years afterward, meaning someone set the bone, kept the person fed, and protected them during a period when they couldn't hunt, gather, or defend themselves at all. That detail matters enormously. It means ancient human groups weren't simply surviving as individuals optimizing for their own safety. They were investing real resources into members who, for a period of time, contributed nothing physical back to the group at all. Why would evolution favor a species willing to do that? Because a group that protects its injured, its elderly, and its very young isn't just being kind. It's preserving knowledge. An elder who can no longer hunt might still remember exactly which valley floods during a bad season, or which plant cured a sickness nobody else in the group has ever seen before. Losing that person means losing information that might never be rediscovered in time to matter. Picture what that actually looked like inside a group. Someone with a shattered leg, unable to walk for weeks. Every single day, someone else had to bring them food. Someone had to check the wound, clean it, watch for infection with nothing, resembling modern medicine to fall back on if things turned bad. This wasn't a brief, easy gesture. It was a sustained commitment, sometimes lasting months, made by people who had every physical reason to simply move on without them. And yet, again and again, the archaeological record shows they didn't. This is the part that's easy to miss. When you picture ancient survival as purely physical, all muscle, spears, and raw endurance. It wasn't. It was deeply informational. Every skill, every warning, every solved problem had to live somewhere, since there was no written record to fall back on if someone forgot. It lived in people, in stories repeated at just the right moment, in a child mimicking an adult's exact hand motion while knapping a stone tool, In a warning passed quickly through a group, the instant a change in the wind suggested danger nearby. Losing a single skilled elder wasn't just an emotional loss. It could mean losing decades of irreplaceable environmental knowledge in an instant. That's why teaching mattered so much, arguably as much as any tool your ancestors ever made. Children didn't learn survival from lectures. They learned by watching, by trying, by failing safely under supervision, gradually building the exact competence that would eventually keep an entire future group alive. This kind of learning takes years. It takes patience. And it takes a group stable enough and safe enough to allow a child room to fail without dying from the mistake. Which brings us back to cooperation, the thread running underneath almost everything already discussed. None of these systems, navigation, fire, medicine, injury care, teaching, worked in isolation. They reinforced each other. Fire enabled safer nights, which enabled teaching, which preserved medicine, which kept injured members alive long enough to keep contributing knowledge, which then improved navigation and hunting for the next generation entirely. It was a closed loop, refined slowly, generation after generation, without anyone fully realizing they were building something this intricate. And here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. None of it required advanced intelligence in the way you might picture it. It required something closer to patience, careful attention, and an ability to learn from other people, generation after generation, without ever writing a single word down. Now think about your own life for a moment. You don't know how to start a fire without a lighter. You probably couldn't identify a single medicinal plant growing near your home. If you got lost without your phone, you'd likely have no idea which direction led back to safety. And that's not a personal failure. It's simply what happens when technology takes over a job your ancestors' minds used to do constantly, every single day, for their entire lives. The skills didn't disappear because humans got worse at surviving. They disappeared because they finally could. Right now, you're surrounded by systems your ancestors never had: hospitals, maps, refrigerators, streetlights, and yet you're only here because thousands of generations before you solved every single one of those problems manually, together, using nothing but knowledge, patience, and each other.